All right, class, just want to give a very quick overview, kind of what we have planned for Friday's class period. So what you're going to be working on kind of for your classwork is going to be these first two parts of our agenda. We're going to ask you to go over, kind of check your answers to this summer project part 2, the sort of kinematics test problems, and then in your lab group kind of do a quick brainstorm refresher on kind of what means to have constant velocity. So those first two things we have circled, we're going to ask that you kind of work on those along with your lab group. Then our last two things, this experimental design Edpuzzle, and then a sample experimental design FRQ question. Those you can kind of do individually for homework. And again, don't forget that still have to kind of sign the syllabus and that lab safety contract that was posted back on the first day of school. So just real briefly about this checking answers to the summer project. Again, they're posted on Canvas. Basically, what we want to do is kind of go through those problems, right? First, check them individually, see how your work matches up to the answer key. And then if there's any one where you're looking through the solution, kind of unsure where your steps might have differed from the steps I wrote out, that would be kind of a great opportunity to kind of talk with your lab group, kind of see if you all can kind of help each other come to a better understanding off of that solution key. If there's any ones that you are still unsure about, like you've discussed with your lab group, none of you are really sure kind of why the right answer is the way that it is, there's this survey that we're going to ask you to fill out for that assignment on Canvas for the work for today. Basically, we're going to just ask you to write out, which problems those came from, was a multiple choice question or for a response question, what number was. Basically, what I'll then do is kind of go through that collection of them, and then when I'm back in person with you all, we'll kind of go over those questions in class, make sure that people are feeling confident with those kinematics example problems. So that'd be kind of first thing we'll ask you to do with your lab group is work on that. The second thing is in that lab group, we're going to ask you to either on a piece of paper or Notability doc, basically something that you can take a photo of and submit to Canvas. We're going to ask you to kind of jot down, brainstorm. Basically, we want you to write down everything that you can think of that's going to deal with this kind of concept of an object traveling with a constant velocity. Now, we're going to ask you to do this. Right, try not to look back to your notes from the summer work. Try as you can kind of do this all on your own with just what you recall. Again, bounce ideas off each other, trying to get as much as you possibly can about constant velocity. And you'll be submitting this document or photo, if you did on a piece of paper, to Canvas for that assignment. This is work for Friday, August 29th. Now, one thing that might help when we're thinking about what are the types of information we know about this concept of constant velocity is that basically for every single piece of material in physics we'll be covering this year, the College Board kind of expects you to be able to think of 4 different ways in which we can represent this material. This is something that there's actually an AP FRQ every year that deals with how can we translate between these various representations of a particular concept. And when we think about these 4 representations, right, if we got something like constant velocity, or maybe we have something like with a Newton's law situation, we're looking at some sort of phenomenon, we want to be able to describe what's going on to our objects. We want to be able to have a written explanation for what's going on. Right, so can we apply the physics, right, describe it in words of why something behaves the way that it does. The other one, and this is where we, as physicists, oftentimes first jump our mind to, is, right, is there any sort of math or formula that we can use to do a derivation to kind of describe what's going on? The other thing we can kind of do is if we maybe have data collected in a experiment, right, we can create a graph that is representing what's going on with our motion. And then the last thing is, right, is there some other sort of diagram we can come up with that's going to be able to model that particular phenomenon? So just kind of try to keep these 4 things in mind as you're going through that brainstorm. See if you might be able to come up with something, a couple of things in each of these different categories that might be able to describe constant velocity.